It was her birthday. The kind of night people would post about for weeks. The rooftop lounge glowing with string lights, champagne tower glistening under the city skyline, guests dressed to impress. Ariel, my wife, floated through the room like she owned it. And, in a way, she did. She picked the venue, the color scheme, the playlist, even the brand of imported roses lining the balcony. I watched her from the edge of the crowd, holding a drink I hadn't touched, smiling at people I barely knew, trying to remember when this stopped being about celebration and started feeling like spectacle. I'm Miles Forrester, 40, general contractor. I build things for a living, structures, spaces, foundations that don't crack when life leans too hard. And for 9 years, I thought I was building something just as solid with Ariel. We had our differences. She grew up around summer homes and European vacations. I grew up around construction dust and discount store sneakers, but I never thought I was less. Until she took the mic. Her heels clicked as she stepped onto the little raised platform they'd set up near the DJ booth. She looked radiant, I won't lie. Red dress hugging her body, eyes glittering with champagne and attention. I expected her to thank everyone for coming, maybe tell a cute story or two, like she usually did when the spotlight found her. Instead, she cleared her throat and glanced in my direction with that sly smile she wore when she thought she was being cute. I just want to say, she began. I scanning the sea of faces, I feel incredibly blessed. Not just because it's my birthday, or because of all you beautiful people being here tonight, but because, well, she paused for dramatic effect. I mean, let's be real. I married down. The crowd laughed. Loud. A ripple of amusement washed across the room. I stood there, trying to understand if I'd heard her correctly. She laughed too, shoulders shaking, like it was the best line she'd ever delivered. I waited for her to pull it back, to say just kidding, to add something soft to clean up the edge, but she didn't. She leaned into it. Sometimes, when you're feeling insecure, you pick a guy who makes you feel like you're the star. Like, you always shine brightest. The laughter doubled. Her friends nearly spilled their drinks. Her father slapped the table like he was at a comedy club. Even Tyson, my best friend and the only person from my side of life who showed up, gave me a look, equal parts apology and disbelief. I smiled. Of course I did. I smiled like a good husband, like a man who knew how to play along. I nodded, pretending I wasn't bleeding out beneath a tailored shirt and quiet restraint. Inside, though, I went still. Not angry. Not defensive. Just still. That was the moment. That exact moment where something inside me, something I hadn't even realized was under pressure, snapped into clarity. She wasn't joking. Not really. You don't say something like that unless it's already settled deep inside you as truth. This wasn't a playful jab. This was a reveal. An accidental admission. And once you see that, once the curtain lifts and you realize the person you've been loving doesn't see you as equal, you can't unsee it. She finished her speech with a toast, lifted her glass high, and turned to blow me a kiss. The crowd followed her lead. They clapped, cheered, took videos. Someone shouted, "You're a queen, Ariel." And in that moment, she was regal, commanding, cruel. I felt like a caricature. The supportive husband. The steady guy in the background who doesn't mind being overshadowed. And maybe for a while, I didn't. Maybe I liked being the one who made sure the house didn't leak and the bills were paid and the dog got walked. But somewhere along the way, she stopped seeing that as strength and started treating it like furniture, necessary, unnoticed. I moved through the rest of the party like a ghost. People talked to me, clapped me on the shoulder, laughed like we were all in on the same joke. But I wasn't. I was the joke. And not the kind that makes you laugh. The kind you regret when the silence hits. Later, when the music got louder and the drink stronger, I slipped out onto the edge of the balcony. The city buzzed below, cars, lights, lives in motion. I stood there gripping the rail, wondering if I'd imagined the weight of what she said. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. It wasn't the words. It was the ease. The comfort with which she said them, the way she basked in the reaction. That ease doesn't come from fiction. It comes from familiarity. She didn't look for me the rest of the night, and I didn't go back to her side. I just stood there, still and silent, while inside, the party roared on. When we got home, she acted like nothing happened. She kicked off her heels by the door, hummed some offbeat pop tune while peeling off her earrings, and started talking about how amazing the party was. "I think it was my best birthday yet," she said, grinning as she opened the fridge, grabbing that overpriced lemon-infused water she always insisted on having chilled. I followed her movements, not saying a word. My coat was still on, my keys still in my hand. But she didn't notice, or maybe she did and decided to pretend she didn't. Finally, she turned, sipping from her glass. You okay? You've been quiet. I looked at her for a long beat. Then I asked, voice flat, what did you mean by that joke? She blinked, like I'd interrupted some internal monologue she'd been enjoying. What joke? You know what joke. She rolled her eyes, walking past me like the question didn't deserve her time. Oh, that. Babe, relax. It was a joke. Everyone laughed. You're being sensitive. There it was, that word again. Sensitive. Ariel's favorite label whenever she didn't want to take responsibility. She said it with the same tone she used when I brought up how she always corrected me at dinner parties, or when she made those sly digs about my dirty boots when I came home from work. It was her way of invalidating me. Not directly, but with just enough condescension to make it sting. I didn't laugh, I said. She froze, hands still on the back of the couch. Slowly, she turned. You're seriously upset about that? Miles, come on. You know I love you. It was a dumb line. People say dumb things when they've had too much champagne and too much attention. You're reading way too much into it. Maybe I was. But maybe I wasn't. Because something about the way she said it, light, dismissive, practiced, made me realize she'd done this before. This wasn't the first time she'd stepped on me to lift herself up. It was just the first time I really heard it. I didn't answer. I didn't argue. I just walked past her into the hall, down to the workshop I'd built with my own hands. A space she never really stepped foot in. Said the smell of sawdust and metal polish gave her a headache. But for me, that room was more than wood and tools. It was sanctuary. It was where I felt like myself. I stood in the center of the space, the glow of the overhead bulb humming above me, and looked at everything I'd built. Contracts spread across the table, blueprints rolled up in the corner, a calendar marked with upcoming projects. She'd never once asked me what I was working on. Never asked how the jobs were going or how the teams were doing. To her, it was all Miles and his maintenance stuff. She didn't know I was negotiating a 7-figure contract with a downtown developer. Didn't know I'd recently bought a second truck and expanded into a third office location. She'd never cared enough to ask. Because to Ariel, I was her safety net. The guy who showed up, who stayed quiet, who held her coat while she basked in the limelight. I looked at my hands. Calloused, rough, strong. The same hands that had fixed every pipe in our house, assembled every piece of furniture she impulsively bought online, paid every bill, even the ones she didn't know we had. Hands that had been steady through every emotional storm, through every dismissive remark. And now those hands were done holding it all up. I started packing. I didn't move with rage. I wasn't shoving things into bags or throwing clothes across the room. No. I packed with the same precision I used to lay foundation beams and draft framing plans. I took my time. My tools, my documents, my personal files, all of it went into the truck quietly. Efficiently. She was upstairs for most of it, curling her hair, getting ready for some late-night hangout with her friends. Girls' night, she called it earlier, winking. The irony wasn't lost on me. At 9:12, she came downstairs in a backless dress, heels in hand, purse slung over her shoulder. She paused just long enough to blow me a kiss over her shoulder. Love you, babe, she said. I didn't respond. She didn't notice. By 9:30, the truck was loaded. The contracts she'd never cared about were in the passenger seat. The workshop lights were off. The door was locked behind me. I didn't touch the bedroom. Left all my clothes hanging, shoes lined up. Let her wonder why I hadn't cleared them out. Let her think I might come back. I didn't leave a note, but I did schedule an email. 6:45 a.m. sharp. I typed it slowly, deliberately. No insults. No begging. Just truth. Quiet and clear. And then, I drove off. Not in anger, not in heartbreak, but in stillness. Because when someone tells you who they are, even through a joke, you listen. And I'd finally heard her. She left at 9:12 p.m. in heels and a backless dress, head held high like nothing had cracked. Like she hadn't stood in front of her entire social circle and turned her husband into the punchline of her power trip. She didn't look back, just called, "Love you, babe," and blew a kiss like we were still playing house. I didn't catch it, didn't raise a hand, didn't flinch. I just watched her go, watched the door close behind her with that soft click that, for the first time in 9 years, didn't carry the weight of routine. It sounded like release. By 9:30, the house had fallen completely silent, and I was already halfway through what I needed to do. I moved with focus, not fury. No slamming drawers or angry music blaring from the Bluetooth speaker. Just the steady shuffle of boots on hardwood, the quiet creak of hinges, the zip of bags closing. Every tool I owned, I packed with care, my drills, levels, measuring tapes, chisels, all the things she joked made me look like a maintenance guy. Those tools had built homes, saved contracts, fed us. But to her, they were props in a life she thought she'd grown too big for. I lined them in the back of my truck with the same reverence I used on job sites. No scratches, no mess. These tools were an extension of me. She didn't respect them. She never respected what they symbolized, what they made possible. Then came the documents. Contracts I'd signed over the years. Project reports. Business registration forms. The leases on the properties I'd invested in quietly under the name M. Forrester Holdings. She didn't know I even had a holding company. Never asked. Never wanted to know. All those years of me thinking I was protecting her from financial worry, making life easier, and maybe I was. But I was also giving her a world she thought came effortlessly. She'd once asked me why I never posted about work. You should share what you do, she'd said. But she didn't mean it. She meant, post something that makes me look good. She didn't want sweat. She wanted shine. That wasn't me. I grabbed my spare phone next, the business line. She didn't even know it existed. I kept it separate from the start, just in case. I'd used it for supplier orders, contract bids, team management. It buzzed with quiet power. Ariel was never curious about it. Too many phones, she said once. Makes you look shady. Ironic. The last thing I took was the key fob to the new truck. The one she thought I was borrowing from the job site. It was mine, titled, insured, and paid for in full. I hadn't told her about it. Some part of me already knew, months ago, that there would come a time when I'd need to go, and go fast. I didn't touch the bedroom. Left the closet full. The shoes. The belts. Even the watch she bought me 2 birthdays ago that never quite fit right. I left it all. I didn't want her to walk into an empty room and know I'd planned this. I wanted her to be confused. To wonder. To replay that speech in her head over and over, trying to figure out if that was the moment everything started to unravel. There was no note. No dramatic monologue. No movie-ending speech about how she broke my heart. I wasn't heartbroken. Not anymore. I was awake. Before I stepped out the door, I scheduled an email on my laptop. Drafted it in the workshop, just a few lines. I wasn't interested in justifying myself. I wasn't going to beg for understanding. I was going to leave her with the only thing she never gave me. Clarity. The email would hit her inbox at 6:45 a.m., right after she stumbled back into the house and realized I wasn't waiting up. Right after she noticed the keys missing from the hook. The boots gone. The garage door untouched. Right after the silence hit her. I walked out of that house the same way I walked out of the church when my father passed. Still, but with finality. Not rushing. Not confused. Just knowing. The driveway lights blinked on as I opened the truck door. I took one last look at the house. Our house. And realized I didn't feel sadness. I felt air. Like my lungs had space again. Like I'd been living bent over without realizing it. And finally straightened my back. The truck engine hummed beneath me as I pulled away. No destination pinned on the GPS. I didn't need one. I had a place ready, a rental under my business name. 1 bedroom. Workshop in the back. Nothing fancy. Just mine. I drove with the windows down. The city thinned out behind me. The noise, the lights, the laughter from her party still ringing in my memory, but it didn't sting anymore. It just sounded like what it was, noise. Manufactured joy for a life that never really included me, just featured me when it was convenient. I wasn't running. I wasn't hiding. I was done pretending she respected me. And that, for the first time in a long while, felt like peace. By the time she stumbled back through the front door, it was just past 6:30 a.m. The sky outside still carried the early hue of morning, the kind of gray-blue light that doesn't quite know if it wants to be dawn or dusk. She was probably half drunk, heels in one hand, phone in the other, expecting to crawl into bed and demand breakfast by noon. But she didn't find me waiting. No boots by the door. No coffee brewing. No hum of the workshop tools she always said were so loud for no reason. No miles. And it hit her fast. I know that because her first call came at 7:02 a.m., a buzzing vibration on the business line I kept in my glove compartment. I didn't even look at it. Just stared ahead, parked in front of the lake house I'd secured a few months ago. At the time, I told myself I needed a quiet place to work, a getaway. Now I realize, deep down, I was already preparing for an escape. The second call came a minute later, then a third, a fourth. Then came the text, "Where are you?" At 7:06 a.m., my scheduled email hit her inbox. Subject line, "You married down, remember?" The body of the message wasn't long. It didn't need to be. "You stood in a room full of people and laughed at the man who built your world with his hands. I hope it was worth it." Below that, 3 attachments. The first was the PDF file of the divorce papers. Everything filled out, no drama, no mess. Just signatures needed. I'd had them drafted by a lawyer she didn't know I kept on retainer for business affairs. Turns out business and personal sometimes overlap. The second was a detailed accounting of the silent partnership I just dissolved. For 9 years, I'd funneled part of my business earnings into the joint account she had access to, never questioned where the money came from. Trips, clothes, spa days. She'd always assumed I was just good with budgets. She didn't know I'd been the silent half-owner in a residential development company that paid quarterly dividends. A company she'd benefited from without ever asking how. Now, that tie was cut. Fully, legally. And the third attachment? A scan of the deed to the house. Under my name. Only mine. The house she lived in. The one she decorated and called ours in Instagram captions. I had bought it before the wedding. Paid it off by our 4th anniversary. But I never added her name. Not out of suspicion, but because she said once, over wine, "I don't need to own anything. I just like pretty things." That should have been a clue. They say the truth is loudest in silence. And that morning, as she stared into an empty house with a phone that wouldn't stop buzzing and a heart that probably hadn't skipped in years, I imagined she heard it loud and clear. Later, Carmen, our next-door neighbor, called me. I didn't ask how she got the number. I already knew. Carmen had always been the quiet observer, the woman who said little but saw everything. Her voice was half laughing, half horrified. "Miles, what did you do?" "I think you broke her," she screamed. I asked, loud, like someone died. "I thought she found a rat or something, but nope, just your email." "Good," I said, then hung up. It wasn't petty. It wasn't revenge. It was precision. Surgical. Clean. Honest. I let her sit in the same quiet I'd lived with for years. Let her walk through that cold house and realize that her world, the one she built on curated dinners and designer rugs and click-worthy parties, was missing its foundation. Because that's what I was. The foundation. And foundations don't need spotlights. They don't ask for attention. But when they leave, everything above them cracks. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat out on the deck of the rental house, listening to the water lap against the dock. No texts. No explanations. No drama. Just me. The man who had been married down, but walked away standing taller than ever. By noon, Tyson called. I let it ring twice before I answered. "She's losing it," he said. "Figured. She's trying to figure out where you went. Asking everybody. Her dad's pissed. Her friends think you're having a midlife crisis." She's trying to figure out where you went. Asking everybody. Her dad's pissed. Her friends think you're having a midlife crisis. I laughed, genuinely, for the first time in weeks. "Tell them I'm having a clarity crisis instead." Tyson paused. "You good, though?" I looked around. Bare walls, wood floors, soft breeze drifting in from the lake. "I'm better than good." "All right, man," he said. "Just wanted to check. Let me know if you need anything." Thanks. For not saying anything to her. She didn't deserve an explanation. He was right. She didn't. Because some people don't want to understand you. They want to own your silence. Mold it into their version of the truth. But when that silence turns into distance, and that distance becomes absence, that's when they finally realize silence was never weakness. It was restraint. And mine had just run out. She used to say it all the time, sometimes with a giggle, sometimes with a mock sigh, sometimes after too much wine when the honesty slipped out between slurred syllables. "You're lucky I chose you." And I'd smile, not because I believed it, but because I thought it was harmless. I thought love could hold through little ego trips and careless jokes. I thought it was just how she expressed herself. But looking back, it wasn't harmless. It was layered and intentional. Over the years, she reminded me I was lucky more times than I can count. Lucky she gave me the time of day. Lucky she tolerated my flannel shirts and muddy boots at her gallery events. Lucky she didn't try to change me, even though she constantly tried to soften my rough edges in every subtle, calculated way possible. She dressed it all up in charm and social grace. But the message was clear. I wasn't quite enough. I was a fixer-upper she learned to live with. I was a story she told when she wanted to appear grounded. He works with his hands, she'd say with a smile to her friends, as if she were describing a golden retriever who knew how to fetch. Never once did she say, he owns 3 firms. Never once did she mention the late nights I spent drawing up blueprints, negotiating contracts, or managing payroll. She'd met me in a tool belt and decided that's where my story ended. But what she never knew, what she never cared to ask, was that I co-owned 3 contracting companies across the state. Not one, not a side hustle. 3. One for luxury residential builds, one for commercial interiors, and one, my quiet favorite, for revitalizing old warehouses into creative loft spaces. I'd help design and oversee half the high-rises downtown. My crews wore uniforms with my logo embroidered on the chest. My name was on contracts signed in rooms she'd never even stepped foot in, and I never told her. Not because I was hiding, but because I didn't feel the need to flaunt it. She saw restraint as inferiority. I saw it as security. I didn't need applause to know my worth. But that was the mistake, wasn't it? Giving someone the benefit of the doubt while they built a narrative around you. Letting someone clip your wings and call it a favor. She laughed at my silence, never realizing silence was where I kept all my strength. She thought not bragging made me small. What it actually made me was dangerous. Because the moment I decided I was done, there was no screaming match. No messy exit. Just a clean, precise disengagement that pulled every cord she didn't even realize was keeping her comfortable. She thought I needed her. She thought I couldn't breathe without her attention, her world, her social calendar. But what she really gave me all those years was a front-row seat to how power warps love. How people don't always marry you for who you are, but for what you can stabilize in them. She married me to feel taller, to feel superior. She needed someone steady to stand on so she could rise. And I played that role for years, not because I lacked self-respect, but because I thought love was service. I thought providing peace, structure, and loyalty would be enough. It wasn't. Because to her, love wasn't partnership, it was optics. The handyman husband. The rugged contrast to her curated lifestyle. The guy who stood quietly at parties while she floated through conversations, dropping jokes that made everyone laugh and me feel small. The one who'd take her keys when she drank too much, walk the dog when she was late to brunch, fix the sink when she overloaded the garbage disposal for the 4th time. But I was never her equal. Just a well-trained feature in the life she built for display. She didn't know about the scholarships I funded for trade school graduates, or the employees I mentored who now own their own crews. She didn't care that I got up at 4:45 a.m. every morning because leadership starts before the rest of the world opens its eyes. She never once asked about the men who counted on me to keep the lights on in their homes and paychecks in their pockets. I wasn't flashy. I wasn't fancy. So I didn't count. But now she's learning what silence costs. What presence actually meant. Because I wasn't just holding the bills or the wrench or the dog leash. I was holding her entire illusion. And when I left, the whole house, her version of it, anyway, started creaking. I got a message from one of her friends yesterday. Morgan, the redhead who always wore sequins like it was New Year's Eve. It just said, "You really walked away like a ghost. You okay?" I didn't answer. Not because I'm angry, but because some people don't get access to the new chapter. They only knew the character I played for her benefit. Now she's choking on the silence she mocked for years, drowning in the absence she once called boring. And I'm not watching from the shadows. I'm not checking her socials or listening for updates through mutual friends. I'm just living. Quietly. Fully. Powerfully. Because the joke was never on me. It was on the woman who never realized what she had until the silence spoke louder than the wedding vow she forgot she made. I expected anger. Denial. Maybe a little shame. What I didn't expect was how fast Ariel would try to spin the story. She didn't apologize. Didn't reach out to take ownership of her words. Instead, she went on the offensive, weaponizing charm, leveraging sympathy, painting herself as the one left in the cold. It was almost impressive how quickly she turned her humiliation into a narrative of betrayal. Like she had rehearsed it. Like she'd been ready all along. By that afternoon, the texts started pouring in. "You just walked out without a word? That's cruel." One of her friends messaged Erica, I think, the one who always referred to me as Mr. Fix-It, like it was cute. Another came 5 minutes later. "You embarrassed her." That one had no name, just a number saved from one of those wine and cheese nights I was dragged to every month like clockwork. Then her mother called. "You've always been emotionally distant, Miles." She said it with that same clipped, icy tone she used the first time I shook her hand, Years ago, when I wore a button-down she thought was too cheap for their brunch table. Back then, I thought time might soften her. But time just gave her more fuel to see me the way she wanted to see me, as less. I didn't answer any of them. Not the calls, not the messages, not the half-hearted guilt trips disguised as concern. They weren't reaching out for truth. They were reaching out for a version of events they could make sense of. One where Ariel was the victim. Where I'd simply vanished out of spite, abandoning the perfect life she built with such love. But I wasn't playing that game. I never had been. That was her arena, public perception, curated drama, emotional manipulation cloaked in casual phrases like, "You know how I am." Well, now she did. Now she knew what I was. Finished. She called Tyson next. I didn't have to ask. He texted me before I could even check. She's spiraling. Never seen her like this. I stared at those words for a while. Not because I felt pity. Not because I wanted to fix it. But because, for the first time, someone else saw her the way I had for years. Unfiltered. Unguarded. Cracking. I typed back slowly. She finally saw me leave. That's what she never thought I'd do. He didn't reply after that. He didn't need to. Ariel's entire world was built on one unspoken assumption, that I would always be there. Steady. Silent. Unmovable. She'd grown so used to my patience that she mistook it for passivity. She thought being calm meant I couldn't leave. That because I didn't fight, I didn't feel. She built her castle on that illusion, and now it was collapsing in real time, stone by stone. I imagined her sitting in the kitchen, surrounded by the expensive things she used to distract from meaning. The Italian espresso machine she never learned to use. The sleek, white marble island she once joked I'd never afford without her taste. The wine fridge with 6 different brands of rose that none of her friends ever finished. She'd look around and realize none of it could call her beautiful. None of it could hold her after a bad day. None of it could stay. I knew the next phase was coming. After guilt didn't work, after shame lost its effect, she'd try to rewrite the story publicly. She needed people to believe she was still in control, that she didn't lose her husband, he abandoned her. It would be strategic, smooth, a few curated posts, a healing caption, maybe a tearful brunch story with friends about how he just snapped. But I also knew the truth had already leaked. I hadn't expected it to, but Carmen told me. Apparently someone filmed her birthday speech. Not the whole party, just the part where she smirked and declared she married down. It had made its way onto a private Instagram story first. Then someone saved it. Then someone shared it. It wasn't viral, not yet, but in our circle, it didn't need to be. The video spoke for itself. I didn't need to defend myself. She'd done it for me. Publicly. Smiling. Champagne in hand. And the people she'd tried to win over with curated pity? They were watching. Some of them, I could already tell, were walking away, not from me, but from her. Even her old coworker texted me. Lynette. I barely remembered her, but the message was simple. I believe you. Just that. It didn't change anything. It didn't soften what happened. But it was validation from someone who had nothing to gain from saying it. Ariel built her reputation on being untouchable. Witty. Charismatic. Always in control. But the problem with always being in control is that the moment you lose grip, everyone sees the cracks. They don't pity you. They remember the times you laughed a little too loudly, cut a little too deep, stood a little too high above everyone else. And when the silence comes for someone like that, it's deafening. I didn't reply to Lynette. I didn't post anything. I didn't need to. I just sat by the lake, watching the still water stretch out into the horizon, thinking about how silence used to feel like a prison. Now it felt like power. And Ariel? She was finally hearing it. She tried guilt. She tried control. And when neither worked, she turned to rage. The texts changed tone first, no longer pleading or wounded, but sharp, accusatory, the kind of messages you send when your world's coming apart and you're desperate to make someone else responsible. I gave you a better life, one of them read. Another, hours later. Do you have any idea how this makes me look? There it was, the part she never meant to say out loud, but couldn't help anymore. How this makes me look. Not how it feels. Not how you hurt me. Not why did you leave. No, her panic wasn't about love. It was about appearance. Ariel had always been about the image. To the world, she was composed. Elegant. Her husband? The rugged balance. The man in the background who never asked for more. It was a setup that worked, because I never interrupted her script. Until I did. Now she was spiraling, and I wasn't responding. That silence? It terrified her. Because silence, to Ariel, was space she couldn't control. It wasn't just the absence of words, it was the absence of the power she held over me. I got a message from her boss, Lynette, the next day. Just 3 words. I believe you. I stared at it for a long time. I hadn't spoken to Lynette much, only at those obligatory work events where I stood at Ariel's side like an accessory. I thought she saw me the way they all did, as the silent plus one with calloused hands and a polite nod. But now I wondered how much she had seen and simply chosen to stay quiet about. Or maybe, like me, she'd just gotten good at recognizing performance. Turns out, Ariel used to mock me at work events too. I never heard her firsthand, but word spread fast once the birthday video leaked. According to a mutual acquaintance, she often referred to me as her handyman husband, usually with a glass of wine in one hand and a sarcastic twist in her smile. People like him, she'd say. Salt of the earth. Very loyal. Just don't ask him about modern art or fine dining. That was how she kept herself elevated, by shrinking me. She didn't realize the foundation she was standing on was me all along. The house, the lifestyle, the spa getaways and designer bags, those were built on my work. My sweat. My strategy. While she was curating aesthetics and hashtags, I was negotiating contracts, managing projects, building things that would outlast both of us. And I never threw it in her face. I didn't need to. She laughed at my restraint, never knowing silence was my currency. And now, with that currency no longer flowing her way, she was broke in more ways than one. The messages kept coming. You blindsided me. You humiliated me. You ruined us. But I hadn't ruined anything. I just walked away from something already hollow. And the irony? She thought walking away made me cruel. But cruelty isn't leaving someone after years of being belittled. Cruelty is loving someone for everything they are and watching them chip away at you to feel taller. Cruelty is what she whispered to her friends when she thought I wasn't listening. The way she spoke about me to her family, he's good with his hands, she'd say, like I was some pet project. Like I was a phase she'd outgrown. Control had always been her currency. Now she was overdrawn. That weekend, I drove to one of my job sites just to clear my head. It was a new development, modern townhomes with clean lines and open spaces. My crew was on site, pouring concrete, setting frames. One of the younger guys, Marcus, spotted me and jogged over, wiping sweat from his forehead. Boss, he said, grinning. Didn't expect to see you here. Just checking in, I said. Didn't want to be stuck in my head all day. He nodded, then hesitated. Saw the video, man. That was cold. I raised an eyebrow. Which part? The party speech. The marry down thing. He looked down, uncomfortable. You didn't deserve that. Thanks, I said simply. You handled it like a king, he added. If it were me. I don't think I'd have stayed that calm. That was the thing. I didn't need to react. I'd already decided. The calm wasn't passive. It was intentional. The storm had passed. Now I was rebuilding. I stayed on site the rest of the afternoon, helping where I could, getting my hands dirty. It reminded me of who I was beneath everything. Not the man she shaped for photos and social events, but the one who built real things, solid things, things that lasted. When I returned to the lake house that night, I ignored the blinking notifications. I made dinner, turned on the radio, and sat by the window with a plate of pasta and a glass of wine she'd have called cheap. It tasted perfect. I didn't think about her voice, or her anger, or her public unraveling. I thought about peace, and how good it felt to live a life that wasn't being narrated for someone else's spotlight. She had used control as a mirror, always checking her reflection through my silence. Now, with no one left to reflect her image, she was starting to see herself for who she really was. And maybe, for once, that truth would be louder than the story she tried to tell. She asked for a meeting, not through a heartfelt message, not with an apology, just a cold, clipped text. Let's talk. I deserve that much. She used to be careful with her words. She used to know how to dress things up to sound graceful, considerate. But now the desperation was showing, leaking through the cracks she couldn't seal fast enough. And for once, she wasn't trying to sound sweet, she was trying to regain control. I told her we could meet, but on my terms. Public. Neutral. Lunch hour. No drama. No chance for tears to become a performance. The cafe I chose sat on a quiet corner downtown, far from her usual orbit of rooftop lounges and curated brunch spots. This place had worn hardwood floors, uneven mugs, and the smell of real coffee instead of overpriced syrups and brand-name pastries. It was the kind of place I liked. Unpretentious. Honest. I arrived 15 minutes early, grabbed a table by the window, and sat with my back to the wall. It wasn't paranoia, it was instinct. I wasn't there to relive anything. I was there to end it properly, face to face. Not for her. For me. She arrived 10 minutes late, wrapped in an oversized coat, no makeup on, hair tied back in a messy bun. For a second, I almost didn't recognize her. The version of Ariel standing before me looked nothing like the woman who lit up stages and dinner parties. This version looked lost. Not fragile. Not broken. Just untethered. She slid into the seat across from me, I scanning the room like she was unsure if she could be seen here. That alone told me she hadn't changed. Even now, her concern wasn't how we got here, it was whether anyone else might witness it. "Hi," she said softly. I nodded. "You wanted to talk?" "I'm here." She hesitated. I watched her fingers curl around the edge of the table, then release, then curl again. She was used to steering conversations, but she didn't know how to navigate this silence. "I didn't mean it," she finally said. "That joke, it came out wrong. I was nervous. I was drinking. People expect me to be funny, and I thought it would land differently." I let the words sit in the air a moment before I responded. "No, you meant it. You just didn't expect me to hear it." Her face twitched, just enough to show she hadn't prepared for that answer. "Miles, you've always known how I talk. I joke around. That's what we do." "No, that's what you do," I corrected. "I sit through it. I've been sitting through it for 9 years." She stared at me then, not with rage or tears, but with a sort of hollow stillness. Like she was trying to calculate whether any of this could still be salvaged. "I didn't think you'd leave," she admitted. Her voice cracked then. "Barely. I thought you loved me." "I did," I said plainly. "That's why I stayed after all the other times." Her bottom lip quivered slightly. "And now I love myself more." That was it. That was the moment. She knew it then. Whatever part of me she thought still lived in that house, in that life, was gone. She reached for my hand, slow and hesitant, but I pulled mine back. She flinched like she'd been struck. "I made a mistake." "No," I said calmly. "You told the truth. You just thought the truth wouldn't cost you anything." The air between us grew thick. I could hear the clink of dishes behind the counter, the hiss of milk being steamed, the distant murmur of other customers. But between us? Just truth. Unfiltered, unforgiving truth. "You think I'm a monster," she whispered. I shook my head. "I think you're someone who got used to being admired. And when that wasn't enough, you started using people like mirrors. You needed someone to reflect your shine back at you. And I did. For years. But I'm done being your spotlight." Tears welled in her eyes then. But I didn't lean forward. I didn't offer a napkin. I didn't move to comfort her, because comfort is for people who own their damage. And she still hadn't. "You'll regret this," she said quietly, but it didn't carry the bite she hoped it would. It wasn't a threat. It was a final attempt at rewiring the power dynamic. One last bluff. "No, Ariel. I'll remember this." "That's different." She wiped under her eyes with the edge of her sleeve. "I don't know how to fix it." "You're not supposed to," I replied. "You're supposed to live with it. Just like I lived with all the things you thought were harmless." We sat in silence after that. Not awkward. Not tense. Just finished. I stood up, nodded once, and walked toward the door. I didn't turn around. I didn't look back to see if she was crying or texting or staring after me. The weight had lifted. The script was over, and I was no longer playing a role in her show. Outside, the breeze hit my face, crisp and clean. I walked 3 blocks to my truck, started the engine, and felt something shift deep in my chest. Closure doesn't always come with forgiveness. Sometimes, it comes with clarity. And I had mine. She thought the world would rally around her. That when I left, the people would rush in to hold her up, comfort her, protect the woman scorned. For a while, maybe they did, at least the ones who didn't know the full story. But image has a shelf life, and hers had just hit expiration. Slowly, one by one, the pieces started crumbling. The apartment, once full of curated laughter and expensive silence, started echoing back at her. Too quiet. Too still. No boots at the door. No soft clatter of my tools in the workshop. No humming of the washing machine late at night after I remembered to do her laundry when she forgot. She must have thought the quiet would be calming. It wasn't. Then came the money, or the absence of it. Her first call to the bank must have been a shock. The joint account was closed. The deposits that padded her weekends gone. The automatic payments bouncing. She had never looked too closely before. She trusted that the balance would refill itself like magic. But the magician was gone now, and the act was over. Her lifestyle depended on an engine she never bothered to understand. She never realized how much of her day-to-day was financed by a man she once referred to as comfortable but not ambitious. What she called comfortable, I called stability. What she dismissed as ordinary, I called integrity. But none of that mattered anymore. Then came the friends. The ones who had laughed loudest at the party, her audience. When the video leaked online, it wasn't just a clip. It was a headline. Birthday girl destroys her own marriage in 10 seconds. That's what someone titled it when it hit social media. Someone with a dark sense of humor and a sharp sense of irony. It spread quickly. Not viral by internet standards, but viral enough. Viral in our town. Viral in our circle. Viral in the boutique fitness class she posted about twice a week. Viral in the wine tasting group she curated on Instagram. And the comments? They weren't kind. Some defended her at first. It's just a joke. Everyone teases their partner. But the deeper the thread ran, the clearer it became. People saw it for what it was. Not banter. Not wit. But cruelty. Dressed up and broadcast in front of people who were finally brave enough to call it out. Her closest circle began to fade. Not with announcements or declarations. Just distance. Slower responses. Missed calls. Brunches that had to be rescheduled. Silence she couldn't control. Because it turns out, when you burn the person who was holding you steady, people start wondering if they're standing too close to the flame. The first time she tried to laugh it off online, it was a carefully filtered photo of her holding a glass of wine, captioned, "Sometimes laughter is misunderstood. Here's to knowing your truth." But there were no likes from her usual crowd. No flame emojis. No hearts. Just one comment from someone named Diane. Hard to misunderstand someone saying they married down while smiling. After that, she didn't post for a while. When she reached out to me again, it wasn't with anger or manipulation. It was desperation. "Can we talk?" No punctuation. Just a flat line of need. The kind of message you send when the walls finally stop holding and you have no one left to lean on. I didn't reply. Not because I was vengeful. Not because I wanted her to suffer. But because I knew that anything I gave her now, words, attention, comfort, would only serve to rebuild the pedestal she once kicked out from under me. And I wasn't in the business of being her support beam anymore. This wasn't about revenge. This was about truth catching up. It always does, eventually. The story she told about me, that I was lucky to have her, that I was the one riding her coattails, that I was just a handyman, had unraveled. And not because I exposed her. I didn't have to. She exposed herself. Publicly. Loudly. Gleefully. And when the applause didn't last, when the echo faded, she looked around and realized the only person who'd ever actually stayed was the one she pushed out the door. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding. Quietly. Intentionally. I took on new projects. Hired 2 new team leads. Spent more time on the job site and even more time at the lake, where my thoughts came without judgment, and the mornings broke with peace, not performance. I wasn't gloating. I wasn't watching her fall apart. I just stopped carrying the weight of her illusion. Let her world collapse. Let the applause die. Let the mirrors crack. Because when someone laughs at you in a room full of people and calls it love, the last thing they deserve is a second performance. And I was done being part of the show. I didn't block her. Not because I wanted to leave the door open, but because silence is louder when it's a choice, not a defense. I didn't curse her out, post cryptic quotes, or send angry messages at 2 a.m. I didn't beg her to understand. I didn't try to explain the weight of 9 years of quiet sacrifice. I let the truth sit with her the way I had to sit with it for years, alone, steady, and undeniable. She tried reaching out a few more times. A missed call. A long message I never opened. A voicemail where her voice cracked halfway through saying my name, followed by that awful pause where she must have realized she didn't even know how to talk to me anymore. That she never really did. She only knew how to talk about me. I didn't respond. Not because I was punishing her, but because I had nothing left to say. Every word I'd held back for years had already been said through my actions. Every insult she dressed up as humor had finally echoed back, not from my mouth, but from the absence I left behind. The silence wasn't meant to hurt her. It was meant to show her how much noise I'd been absorbing all along. Now, I live in a quiet cottage by the lake. No marble countertops. No decorative pillows bought for the aesthetic but never used. Just clean wood floors, honest air, and space that breathes with me. It's not empty, it's peaceful. There's no performance here. No stage joy. Just me, and the life I rebuilt. My business is thriving. Funny how that works. When the noise dies down, you start to see things clearly. I poured everything I had into my companies. More focus, more leadership, more energy. Projects finished faster. Clients noticed the change. I wasn't dragging around emotional dead weight anymore. And the freedom showed in the work. I build homes again. Real ones. Foundations that don't shift under pressure. I shake the hands of people who look me in the eye. I walk into rooms and don't feel like I have to shrink myself to make someone else feel taller. I don't have to downplay what I've built to protect someone else's ego. Sometimes I get messages from people who saw the video. I don't know how many times it's been reposted, but apparently it struck a chord. I never reply. I don't need applause for walking away. But the messages come anyway. You handled that with grace. You're an example of strength. That's silence. Masterclass. But it wasn't grace. It was clarity. Because there's something about being laughed at by the person who's supposed to love you that strips away every illusion. When someone tells you, out loud, on your birthday, with a mic in their hand and your friends watching, that they married you to feel superior, something inside you stopped settling. That moment didn't just change my marriage. It changed me. It reminded me that being steady is a gift, but letting people mistake it for weakness is a choice. And I'd chosen wrong for too long. There are still moments when memories creep in. Not the big ones. The wedding, the trips, the parties. Those are all noise. I remember the quiet ones. The ones that used to feel safe. Her head on my shoulder during a storm. Sunday mornings before the world woke up. The way she used to hum under her breath when she was cooking. Before the pride. Before the image. But even those memories don't hurt anymore. They just remind me I was capable of love. And now, I'm capable of it for myself. I pass by people sometimes who still look at me with that "I heard what happened" expression. Some offer nods. Some avoid eye contact. Some ask how I'm doing with that too careful tone, like they're unsure if I'm whole again. I always smile. Because I'm not whole again. I'm whole for the first time. You see, I spent years being the man behind the scenes. Quiet. Reliable. Steady. And for a while, I thought that was enough. That being the calm in someone else's storm meant you had value. But storms don't love calm. They consume it. And Ariel, God bless her, was a storm who never learned how to respect stillness. I used to think the worst thing someone could do is cheat on you, lie to you, betray you. But I've learned the worst thing someone can do is make you feel small. Bit by bit, word by word, laugh by laugh, until one day, you stop recognizing your own strength. Not anymore. Now, I write my own story. No stage. No spotlight. No punchline. Just a man who stopped asking to be seen and finally decided to stand in the light he built himself. And you know what? It's enough.